a fella by the name of Henry VIII. That's a baby Henry VIII. Isn't he cute? He's got chubby cheeks and a little rosebud mouth. Now, Henry VIII is one of a long line of very, very loyal Catholic kings who are adamantly in favor of the traditional Catholic Church. Henry, as the king, is loyal to the church. He understands that it is the church and the Pope that gives him the power of kingship, divine right. Henry grows up a loyal Catholic. In fact, Henry actually writes a number of pamphlets. He writes a number of papers on the glory of the papacy, and he actually ends up writing several papers condemning Martin Luther as a tool of the devil and glorying in the papacy and basically trying to get the Pope to go chase down Martin Luther and like burn him at the stake and string him up and do all sorts of horrible things to him. As a king, Henry is concerned with his standing and his family because he believes that his family represents his country. Now, we got to take a small side trip here. We'll go into this more in the next section when we get to the Counter-Reformation and the revolutions. But let me just give you a little bit of information on kings and how kings view themselves. Kings, those are both pictures of Henry VIII, by the way. Kings view themselves, they've been raised from the time they are born. They are told that they are higher on the chain of being than other people. They are special. They were handpicked to be kings by the power of God. The Pope has affirmed them. They are above normal people. They are powerful. They are special. And since they're told this from the time they're born, they totally believe it. Both the kings and the people that they rule over believe that the king's health, well-being, and moral values directly impact the health and well-being of their country. Okay, nowadays, I mean, if someone in our leadership does something inappropriate, we say, oh, well, they're a bad politician, they're a bad person, kick them out of office. But we don't worry that our entire country is going to go downhill because one guy did something inappropriate, like send pictures of his privates on Twitter, okay? We don't worry about our country being tied to the morality of our leaders. These people do. They really believe that their king is handpicked and blessed by God. There's actually, the whole way up to the 1700s in France, there's a tradition where the French king will actually go, and for about 12 hours one day, he will stand on the steps of the cathedral and lay hands on, touch, anyone who comes to him. Because it is believed that the king can actually cure certain diseases by touching people who have those diseases. They believe that God has blessed the king with superpowers. The king actually has the grace of God and he can share it with his people. Henry has been taught that he has these special abilities from the time that he is born. And he is taught that it is his duty to be a good king to make sure that his country is healthy, and that part of his duty as king is to produce a male heir. He needs a son. Now we're like, oh yeah, that's nice, Henry needs a kid, whatever. No, you don't understand. Having a kid is one of the most important things that Henry can do. Henry knows that, and his people know, that when his son is born, instead of just going, oh yay, the king has a kid, to the people of England, that son represents God's blessing. England will continue because there's a prince. If there is no son, if there's no male heir, God doesn't like England, and England won't continue because there's no one to carry on the royal line. That emphasis on the king as representing the well-being of his country can be seen in the right-hand portrait of Henry VIII. Most likely, that is kind of a glamour shot of Henry VIII. He actually was older than that painting portrays him when it was painted, but Henry wants to be shown healthy and strong because his well-being reflects the well-being of his country. That painting is actually painted by Henry's court painter, a guy by the name of Hans Holbein. Now, Holbein is known for his portraits. That's what Hans Holbein is best at. He's best at his portraits. He does other paintings as well, but mostly he focuses on portraiture. Holbein tries very hard actually to break out of that portrait reputation. It's kind of like an actor when they play one part and then everybody sees them as that kind of part over and over again, and that's all they get to play. Holbein is a great artist, but he is known as a portrait painter, so that's the job he keeps getting. Henry keeps hiring him to paint portraits. Holbein wants to do more. So what he tries to do is, even when he's hired to paint a portrait, he tries to paint something a little bit different, a little bit unique, something that shows off his talents. For example, this is a portrait of two ambassadors. These two guys are actually ambassadors from the French court to the English court, and there is a serious conflict, a discord. There is the hints and stirrings of war between France and England. The reasons why are very complicated. You can look them up if you want to. Basically, it comes down to the fact that France and England actually shared a king for a while. So there's a question of who actually owns which parts of France and England, and the French king's claiming part of England, and Henry's claiming part of France, and it's a mess. These two ambassadors actually have a very difficult time in England, and there are details that Holbein adds into their portrait that implies that. For example, the musical instrument, the lute down there, actually has a broken string, implying that the music between the two countries has soured. These guys' scientific and academic interests are also reflected back in the background with the materials that are painted on the table behind them. Again, Holbein is trying to work in details other than just portraits. And then, of course, there's that big thingy down at the bottom. Now, some of you immediately know what that is, and some of you are going, what's that weird diagonal white shape? That's actually an optical illusion, a trick that Holbein puts into place in order to prove how talented he is. It's actually a method of viewing called anamorphosis, and what it is it's an object which is distorted from one angle and perfect viewed from another angle. If you lean on your computer screen, lean toward your right-hand side, okay? If you lean far enough towards your right-hand side and look at that weird shape at the bottom, from the side, you're leaning over and looking at it, what you're going to see is that weird shape actually becomes a human skull. No, I'm not kidding. Here, let me show you. There you go. When you actually view the painting from the right angle, that skull is perfectly visible, but Holbein hides it through this technique in order to show off his skill as an artist. He's good enough to paint optical illusions, and he wants to show what he can do, because all anyone will ever let him paint are portraits. Now, Henry VIII is one of his largest patrons, one of the guys who hires him most frequently. And Henry has a number of court portraits done, both of himself and of his lovely wife. Now, Henry's lovely wife is a lady by the name of Catherine of Aragon. She is a Spanish princess, and she and her family are good Catholics. She's a good match for Henry because the Spanish royalty are loyal to the Pope, just like Henry is loyal to the Pope. And her family are very wealthy, and they become allies against the King of France. Now,